Susan Miller smoothed her navy blue diplomatic uniform and took a deep breath. Around her, the massive council chamber buzzed with activity. Representatives from 27 alien species filled the curved rows of seats, their voices a mix of mechanical translations and native languages. Some floated in special tanks, others sat on cushioned platforms, and a few stood at specialized stations. The air smelled faintly of ozone and alien perfumes. The Grand Hall of Unity was designed to impress. Its ceiling arched hundreds of feet overhead, made of transparent crystal that showed the stars beyond. The chamber itself was built from rare materials from 100 worlds. Banners and symbols of the founding species hung along the walls. Susan checked her tablet one last time and looked at her team. Jack Porter, her chief science advisor, was reviewing data files. Beside him, Greg Washington, the military attaché, sat with perfect posture, his face expressionless but his eyes sharp. Linda Evans, the economic specialist, was typing notes rapidly. 3 minutes until session begins, announced the automated translator in Susan's ear. This was the 47th Galactic Council meeting Susan had attended as Earth's ambassador. For 12 years she had sat in this chamber, speaking politely, following procedures, and watching as human concerns were pushed aside again and again. High Chancellor Zil Nara, an 8-foot-tall Veskarian with iridescent scales and 4 arms, took the central podium. His voice boomed through the chamber as the translation systems activated. We begin the 328th Quarterly Council session. First on our agenda, resource allocations from the newly charted Orion Spur systems. Susan sat straighter. This was critical. Earth's outer colonies were struggling with resource shortages. The new discoveries could solve these problems if humans received fair access. For 3 hours, Susan listened as species after species presented their claims. When it was her turn, she laid out Earth's needs clearly. Medical supplies for the Proxima colonies, rare minerals for the Mars manufacturing centers, and fuel for the Jupiter stations. The Aldorian representative, a bulbous creature with 5 eye stalks, immediately objected. Humans have not demonstrated proper resource management in previous allocations. We suggest minimal provisions until they prove themselves. Several other representatives nodded or made their species equivalent gestures. Susan began her defense, but the High Chancellor cut her off. We must move forward. The Council proposes a 10% allocation to Earth territories, with the remaining distributed among senior Council members. 10%? Susan stood up. Our colonies represent 15% of the total galactic human population. We contribute 20% of technical innovations to shared databases. This allocation is insufficient and unfair. The High Chancellor's secondary eyes barely looked at her. The vote has been called. Those in favor? Susan watched as hand after hand, tentacle after tentacle raised in agreement. Only 3 smaller species, traditional human allies, voted against. The motion carries, announced the High Chancellor. Next item, trade route permissions for the Outer Rim. Susan felt something break inside her. She looked at her team and saw the same realization in their eyes. This was never going to change. 12 years of diplomacy, concessions, and patience had gained humanity nothing. She pressed the button on her console. Earth requests speaking privileges. The High Chancellor flicked a hand dismissively. Granted, but please be brief. We have an extensive agenda. Susan stood, her voice quiet but firm. For 63 years, humanity has participated in this council. For 63 years, we have followed your rules, shared our discoveries, and trusted in the promise of galactic unity. Today makes it clear that this promise is empty for us. The chamber grew still. Humanity will no longer waste time seeking respect where none is offered. Susan closed her console. She nodded to her team. As one, they stood and collected their materials. "What are you doing?" the High Chancellor asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "We're leaving," Susan said simply. "Goodbye." The human delegation walked out of the grand chamber, their footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind them, murmurs began to rise as the council members exchanged glances. "They'll be back tomorrow," the Eldorian representative said with a dismissive wave of an appendage. The High Chancellor wasn't so sure. Captain Alan Wright stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Northern Star, his hands clasped behind his back. Through the main viewport, the glittering spires of the Galactic Council headquarters shone against the backdrop of the artificial ring world that housed the diplomatic center of 27 spacefaring civilizations. His communication panel chimed. "Captain, we have the ambassador's team incoming. ETA 3 minutes." "Prepare for immediate departure," Alan replied, his voice calm despite the unusual order. The bridge crew exchanged glances but followed his commands without question. They had all been briefed on Operation Departure years ago, but no one had expected to ever implement it. When Ambassador Susan Miller stepped onto the bridge, Alan could see the mix of emotions on her face: determination, sadness, and something else. Relief, perhaps. "It's done," Susan said. "Enact Protocol 7. Alan nodded and pressed his command console. "All stations, this is your captain. Protocol 7 is now active. Communications. Shut down all standard galactic frequencies. Engineering. Prepare for full jump once clear of the diplomatic zone." Lieutenant Kate Morgan moved quickly to her station. Her fingers flew across her console as she began systematically disconnecting the ship from the galactic communication network. "Beginning removal of human tech innovations from shared databases," she reported. "Implementing digital security measures." Susan watched the crew work. "Has Earth Central confirmed the recall orders?" she asked Alan. "Yes, Ambassador. All human, diplomatic personnel across every galactic outpost are to return home within 48 hours. The message went out 10 minutes ago, encoded on our secure channels." On the screens around them, they could see other human ships disengaging from docking stations. The departure was coordinated and methodical, showing none of the emotional reaction the aliens might have expected. "The Council believes we're having an emotional outburst," Susan said quietly. "High Chancellor Zil Nara actually looked amused when we left." Alan's expression hardened. "They've never understood us, not really." Down in the ship's data center, technicians worked quickly to extract sensitive information from the galactic networks. One young officer looked up at his supervisor with wide eyes. "Sir, we're really doing this? Cutting off everything?" The older man nodded. "Every treaty gives us the right to withdraw our technological contributions if we leave the Council. We're just exercising that right." Back on the bridge, Kate Morgan reported, "Database extraction at 60%. We've already removed the medical research and the gravitational stabilizer designs." Susan watched the progress bars on the main screen. "Any reaction from the Council yet?" "Nothing official," Alan replied. "A few confused messages from junior diplomats wondering where our staff went. The Council itself hasn't even noticed we're serious." The Northern Star's engines hummed as they prepared for departure. On a side screen, Susan could see human embassies across the galaxy going dark, their lights shutting off one by one as staff evacuated. "The Council won't stay oblivious for long," Greg Washington said as he joined them on the bridge. "I give it 2 days before they realize this isn't a tantrum." Susan nodded. "And 2 weeks before they realize what it actually means for them." The ship gently pulled away from its docking port. Around them, 36 other human vessels did the same, forming up in a silent procession away from the station. A message flashed on Alan's private screen. He read it and looked up at Susan. "Earth Central has activated the rest of Operation Departure. All human trade ships are changing course. Research stations are packing up. Manufacturing plants in shared spaces are shutting down." "Any last messages from the Council?" Susan asked. Kate checked her console. "Just one, from High Chancellor Zil Nara's office." She paused. "It says, 'Let them sulk. They'll return when they realize their dependence on us.'" A small smile touched Susan's lips. "He really doesn't understand what's happening, does he?" Alan shook his head. "None of them do, not yet." As the Northern Star cleared the diplomatic zone, Alan gave the order to jump. The stars outside the viewport stretched and blurred as the ship accelerated toward Earth, leaving behind a Council that had not yet begun to panic. But they would. Soon. 2 weeks after the human walkout, Major Peter Kelly sat in the dim light of Earth's Defense Intelligence Center. Screens surrounded him, each showing different feeds from across the galaxy. His job was simple: monitor alien communications and gauge their reactions. What he saw made him smile. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Orion colonies," said a young analyst at a nearby desk. Peter nodded. "Put it through." The main screen lit up with the face of Dr. Olivia Grant, a human xenobiologist, who had been working on a joint research project with the Eldorians. "Major, the situation here is getting interesting," she said. "3 different alien research teams have contacted me today begging for our medical staff to return. Their projects are falling apart without human support." Peter made a note in his digital pad. "Are they offering anything?" "Better terms, more credit for our work, even seats on their science councils," Olivia replied. "They sound desperate." "Good. Keep me updated." After the call ended, Peter turned to another screen showing economic data. Red indicators flashed across trade routes that had once been dominated by human ships. Markets in 3 sectors had reported significant drops in activity. Supply chains built over decades were suddenly full of holes. His private line beeped. It was Susan Miller. "Major Kelly, what's the status report?" she asked, her face serious. "It's happening faster than we predicted," Peter said. "The first major. Systems are already failing." He pulled up footage from a Veskarian mining colony. The atmospheric regulators, built with human components, were showing error messages. No one could fix them without the maintenance codes that had been withdrawn along with human technical support. "The Galactic Council held an emergency session yesterday," Susan told him. "They expected us to attend and negotiate." "Let me guess," Peter said. "Empty human seats?" Susan nodded. "They're still treating this like a negotiation tactic. They don't understand we're not coming back under the old terms." On another screen, Peter could see a luxury space liner drifting near the Centauri Junction. Its engines, human-designed, needed parts that were no longer being supplied. "The smaller species are getting nervous," he reported. "The Menaki representative sent 3 messages asking for private talks with Earth." Susan wasn't surprised. The Menaki had always been treated poorly by the dominant council species, much like humans. What about the big players? The Veskarians and Eldorians? Peter switched screens to show footage of an Eldorian diplomatic vessel. Still arrogant. Their ambassador made a public statement saying the galaxy would barely notice humanity's absence. A junior analyst approached with a tablet. "Sir, the first wave of specialized tech recalls is complete. The quantum stabilizers at Proxima Station have been removed as requested." Peter took the tablet. These stabilizers were crucial for faster-than-light communication across certain regions. Without them, 3 entire sectors would have to revert to older, slower communication methods. "Any pushback?" Susan asked. "They tried to stop us legally," Peter said, "but every piece of technology was covered in the fine print of our sharing agreements. Right to withdrawal upon cessation of partnership. They never thought we'd actually leave." On the main view screen, real-time data showed galactic stock markets beginning to slide. The Eldorian Financial Index had dropped 12% in just one day. "It's only going to get worse for them," Susan said quietly. "Next week we start recalling our medical personnel from their hospitals." Peter nodded. Human doctors had introduced treatments for diseases that had plagued alien species for centuries. Without ongoing human support, those treatments would begin to fail. "How's the home front?" he asked. "Surprisingly calm," Susan replied. People understood this was coming. Eventually, the new supply chains are activating as planned. An alert flashed on Peter's screen. An urgent message from the council addressed to all human officials. He opened it. "Listen to this," he told Susan. "The Galactic Council extends formal invitation to human representatives to discuss grievances and potential accommodations. Immediate response requested." Susan's expression didn't change. "File it." No response. The first real tremors of panic were beginning. And they were right on schedule. 1 month after the human departure, an unusual silence fell over the normally busy Galactic Archive. Uzor, the blue-skinned archive director, floated on his gravity pad through the vast library of knowledge. Something had been bothering him for days. As keeper of all shared galactic information, he had access to every file, every database, every piece of knowledge shared between species, or so he had thought. Run the comparison again, he told his assistant. The assistant, a small reptilian, being named Trisk, tapped on a translucent screen. I've already checked 3 times, Director. The results are the same. On the giant display before them, 2 versions of a human medical device appeared side by side. One was the version humans had shared with the galactic community years ago. The other was recovered from a human hospital ship before it left Council space. They were different. The shared version has only 80% of the capabilities of the actual human version, Uzor said, his voice low with shock. And this isn't the only example, is it? Trisk shook his head. I've found similar patterns in their FTL drive designs, their agricultural methods, even their basic computer systems. Everything they shared with us was edited. Functional, but limited. Uzor stared at the screen. For decades, the Council had believed humans were merely average innovators who happened to be good at adaptation. Now he realized the truth. They had been hiding their true capabilities all along. Far across Council space, Commander John Davis stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Horizon. Before him, a fleet of 50 new ships moved in perfect formation. These weren't the vessels the galactic community knew about. These ships had never been registered with Council authorities. All ships report ready, Commander, his first officer reported. John nodded. Begin the jump sequence. The fleet disappeared from normal space, using a jump technology far more advanced than what humans had shared with the Council. They reappeared near the outer rim, an area that had been declared unstable for human habitation by Council scientists years ago. The first officer smiled. Jump successful. All ships at designated coordinates. John looked at the planet growing larger in their view screen. Eden Colony, a thriving human settlement of 3 million people that officially didn't exist. The Council had no idea humans had solved the instability problem long ago. Send the signal, John ordered. Tell them it's time to come out of hiding. Back at the Galactic Council headquarters, an emergency meeting was in chaos. A spy drone had returned with footage that was now playing on the main screen. Massive construction projects throughout Earth's solar system, orbital platforms, defense systems, and shipyards far larger than humans had reported in official documents. They've been preparing for independence for years, gasped one representative. High Chancellor Zilnara's scales had lost their shine. Send envoys to Earth immediately. Offer them anything they want. A nervous aide approached. Sir, we've already tried. 3 diplomatic ships were turned away at the edge of their solar system. They've established new defensive perimeters we can't penetrate. In another corner of the chamber, representatives from 7 smaller species huddled together, speaking in whispers. The Menaki delegate, a furry creature with large eyes, spoke quietly to his group. Humans have sent us private communications. They're offering separate alliances outside Council control. The others looked shocked. That violates Council law, one said. The Menaki delegate gave a small shrug. What has Council law done for our people? The humans are offering fair terms. Something we've never gotten here. On Earth, Susan Miller sat in a sunlit office looking at reports from across the galaxy. A soft chime announced a visitor, Lisa Wong, Earth's resource director. The alternative supply chains are fully operational, Lisa reported. Our colonies will be fine without Council trade routes. Susan nodded. And the independent colony? Lisa smiled. Eden is revealed and fully operational. 6 other hidden colonies are preparing to announce their existence. Susan looked out the window at the blue sky. Have any Council species reached out directly? 17 so far, Lisa replied. Mostly the smaller ones who were treated like we were. Susan allowed herself a small smile. The Council had never understood that dependency worked both ways. They had taken human contributions for granted, never realizing how deeply their systems relied on human innovation. Now they were beginning to learn. and their panic was just beginning. 3 months into human isolation, the Galactic Council's main chamber had changed dramatically. The once orderly meetings were now filled with shouting, accusations, and fear. Today, the chamber was nearly empty. Many representatives had been called home by their governments to deal with growing crises. High Chancellor Zilnara's scales had dulled to a pale gray, a sign of extreme stress in Veskarians. His 4 hands trembled slightly as he reviewed the latest economic reports. The Centauri sector markets have collapsed completely, reported an aide. The ripple effects are hitting the core worlds now. Outside the chamber windows, they could see ships rushing in all directions. The usual smooth flow of traffic had given way to chaos as supplies became scarce. In her office on Earth, Lisa Wong studied a holographic map showing resource movements across the galaxy. Red lines represented the old council trade routes now empty of human ships. Green lines showed the new paths established by the human cooperative. The alternative supply chains are working better than expected, she told Susan Miller, who sat across from her. Our colonies are actually getting more resources now than when we were in the council. Susan nodded. And the effect on council space? Lisa adjusted the display to show flashing red areas. 3 major sectors are experiencing critical shortages. Medical supplies are running low on at least 12 worlds. The door opened and Major Peter Kelly walked in. You need to see this, he said, activating the wall screen. The screen showed footage of 3 large Veskarian warships approaching a small human mining outpost near the former council border. They're trying to intimidate us into rejoining the Council, Peter explained. They think if they threaten one of our smaller operations, we'll come running back. They watched as the warships took up positions around the small station. A message flashed across the screen. Veskarian command demanding immediate surrender of the outpost. The station's response was unexpected. A pulse of blue energy spread out from the tiny outpost, washing over the warships. Their lights flickered and died. The mighty vessels drifted powerless in space. What was that? Lisa asked, leaning forward. A defense system we never shared with the council, Peter said with a small smile. Non-lethal, but very effective. Those ships will need to be towed home. Susan's tablet chimed with an incoming message. It's starting, she said after reading. The Menaki homeworld is in revolt. Their people found out how their leaders dismissed human assistance for years. 3 other species are reporting similar uprisings. The view on the screen changed to show a public square on a distant world. Thousands of alien beings were gathered, holding signs with human writing. One large banner read, Join the Human Cooperative. Peter handed Susan another tablet. We've prepared the announcement as you requested. Susan read it carefully before nodding. Send it to all channels, all frequencies. Make sure every species receives it. Throughout council space, on millions of screens, Susan's face appeared. Her expression was calm but firm as she spoke. For decades, humanity has been a loyal member of the galactic community. Today, we announce the formation of the Human Cooperative, a new political entity separate from the Galactic Council. We invite all species who seek fair treatment and mutual respect to join us, she continued, outlining the basic principles of the cooperative: equal representation, shared benefits, and true collaboration rather than the hierarchy of the council. The Pine message was still playing when Lisa's console began lighting up with incoming communications. 17 species are requesting immediate admission to the cooperative, she reported, her eyes wide with surprise. Most are smaller worlds that were marginalized by the council. Susan nodded. Accept them all. Begin integration protocols. On the council station, High Chancellor Silnara watched the human announcement with growing horror. Around him, the remaining council members were arguing loudly about what to do. Some demanded military action. Others called for immediate concessions to humans. The Eldorian representative slammed his appendage on the table. This is an illegal action. The council must remain unified. But even as he spoke, 3 more representatives stood and quietly left the chamber. Their worlds had already decided to join the humans. The panic was no longer beginning. It had arrived in full force. Half a year after the human walkout, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different. More than a third of the seats were empty. The grand banners of several species had been removed. The remaining representatives sat closer together, as if seeking comfort in proximity. High Chancellor Zilnara stood at the central podium. His once proud posture was slightly stooped. "The Council has voted to extend an official olive branch to our human friends," he announced, using a human phrase that had been carefully chosen by his advisors. "We acknowledge that mistakes were made." The words tasted bitter in his mouth. For centuries, the Veskarians had never admitted error to any species. But desperate times required desperate measures. 3 days later, a human ship approached the Council station for the first time in 6 months. It was not the traditional diplomatic vessel they expected, but a sleek military cruiser. Its design was unlike anything the Council had seen before. Admiral Frank Johnson led the human delegation into the Council chamber. He wore a simple blue uniform with minimal decorations, but his presence commanded attention. With him were 5 other humans, each specializing in different aspects of galactic relations. The Council had prepared an elaborate welcome ceremony, but Frank moved directly to the point. "We are here to listen," he said simply. Nothing more. High Chancellor Zilnara bowed slightly, another unprecedented gesture. "The Council proposes new terms for human participation," he said. 3 permanent seats on the High Council instead of 1. Veto power on resource allocations. Priority access to new discoveries. Frank's expression didn't change. "Continue." For an hour, the Chancellor outlined the new offer. Tax benefits, military protection, research priorities. Everything humans had requested over the years and been denied. When the Chancellor finished, Frank remained silent for a long moment. Then he motioned to one of his team members. "We have prepared a simple data presentation," Frank said. "With your permission?" The Council screens lit up with economic charts. They showed the human cooperative functioning completely outside galactic economic systems. Trade volume within the cooperative had already surpassed what these worlds had, done under Council regulation. "We are not here to negotiate better terms," Frank said calmly. "We are here to inform you of a new reality." Another slide appeared, showing 32 species that had signed bilateral agreements with Earth. Many were former Council members. The Eldorian representative rose in anger. "This breaks every Council law. You cannot form separate alliances." Colonel Sarah Barnes, another member of the human delegation, spoke for the first time. "Laws that no longer apply to us. We left, remember?" The chamber erupted in shouts and accusations. Some demanded punishment for the defecting species. Others called for military action against human worlds. Frank waited until the noise died down. "We did not come to argue. We came out of respect for our long history together. The human cooperative exists. It will continue to exist with or without your approval." He stood to leave, his team following his lead. "Wait." The Chancellor's voice had a desperate edge. "What do you want from us? What will make humans return?" Frank paused at the doorway. "You still don't understand. We're not asking for a better seat at your table. We've built our own." As the human delegation left the chamber, chaos erupted again. The Eldorian representative stormed out, followed by several allies. 3 smaller species huddled together, whispering about joining the cooperative. The High Chancellor sat alone at his podium, watching his council fragment before his eyes. On the human vessel, Frank joined a private communication with Susan Miller. "It went exactly as you predicted," he reported. "They offered everything we asked for years ago." Susan nodded on the screen. "And now it's too late." "The Eldorians looked ready to break away completely," Frank added. "They're trying to form their own alliance to compete with us." "Let them try," Susan replied. "The galaxy is changing. The old power structure is crumbling." Frank looked back at the council station growing smaller in the view screen. "They still think this is a negotiation tactic." "They'll understand soon enough," Susan said. "We're not coming back." 1 year had passed since humans walked out of the council chamber. The galaxy had changed more in these 12 months than in the previous century. Vice Admiral Diane Carter stood on the observation deck of the defense station Guardian, watching ships move through the busy space lanes below. The station marked the border of human cooperative space, one of 12 such outposts forming a defensive line. "Status report," she said to the officer beside her. 47 member species now, Admiral," he replied. "The Hixari joined yesterday. That's 8 new members in the last month alone." Diane nodded. The cooperative had grown faster than anyone expected. Most of the new members were smaller species that had been ignored or exploited by the Council for generations. "Any movement from Council forces?" The officer checked his tablet. "The Veskarian battle group is still holding position 3 light years out. They've been there for 2 weeks, just watching." Diane smiled slightly. The mighty Veskarian fleet, that once controlled half the galaxy, now just observed, afraid to provoke the cooperative's defensive systems. On Earth, a team of scientists and engineers gathered in a massive underground facility. Dr. Ben Russell checked the final calculations on his screen before looking up at the experimental device in the center of the room. "The wormhole stabilizer is ready for the final test," he announced. "If this works, we'll cut travel time between cooperative worlds from weeks to minutes." This technology had been in development for decades, but humans had kept it hidden from the Council. Now, without Council restrictions, they could finally perfect it. The test began. Energy swirled around the device, forming a small but stable wormhole. Cheers erupted when the test probe disappeared into it and emerged at the target location 50 light-years away. Exactly as planned. Dr. Russell sent the results directly to Susan Miller, now known as High Representative Miller of the Cooperative. Susan read the report with satisfaction. The wormhole network would bind cooperative worlds together as never before, creating an unbreakable union. Across the galaxy, the effects of the human departure continued to reshape politics and power. The once mighty council had diminished, with barely half its original members remaining. Several had joined the human cooperative. Others had allied with the Eldorians, who had broken away to form their own competing alliance. The council chamber, once the pride of galactic civilization, now felt empty and quiet. High Chancellor Zilnara sat alone at his desk, reviewing the latest reports. Each one brought more bad news. His private communication device chimed. The message was encoded on a channel so secure that only he knew of its existence. "This is High Chancellor Zilnara," he said softly. Susan Miller's face appeared on the screen. He was shocked by the direct contact. "Chancellor," she greeted him formally. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, High Representative," he replied, trying to maintain his dignity despite his surprise. "What can I do for you?" Susan's expression was unreadable. "I've received intelligence that your position in the Council is becoming precarious. There are those who blame you personally for losing humanity." Zilnara's scales flickered with anxiety. She was right. Just yesterday, 3 council members had suggested he step down. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because despite our differences, you were never cruel, only dismissive," Susan replied. "The cooperative could offer you personal amnesty, a comfortable position as an advisor on inter-alliance relations." The Chancellor stared at her image. Was this what it had come to? The mighty Veskarian High Chancellor considering asylum with humans? "I will consider your offer," he said finally. After the call ended, Zilnara stood at his window, looking out at the stars. How had things changed so dramatically in just 1 year? The humans, once dismissed as an unimportant species, now held the future of the galaxy in their hands, and all because they had the courage to walk away from a table where they weren't respected. On Eden Colony, now the second capital of the cooperative, builders worked on a massive new diplomatic center. Unlike the Council's hierarchical chamber, this one was circular with all seats at the same level. No species would stand above another here. The new galactic order was taking shape, and it had begun with a simple act: humans leaving a meeting. 18. Months after the human walkout, a small fleet of ships approached the old council station. They were sleek and elegant, bearing the new emblem of the human cooperative, a circle of stars with Earth at the center, but space for many more stars to join the pattern. Chief Negotiator Ryan Clark straightened his formal blue uniform as he prepared to lead the human delegation. After months of careful planning, humans were returning to the council chamber, not as members but as equals. "Ready?" asked his assistant. Ryan nodded. "History doesn't often give second chances. Let's make this one count." The council chamber had changed dramatically. Once filled with representatives from 27 founding species, now only 14 remained. The grand hall felt hollow, the empty seats a constant reminder of what had been lost. High Chancellor Zilnara had been replaced by a Tirani representative, a species that had once been close allies with the Veskarians. The new chancellor looked nervous as the human delegation entered. "We welcome the representatives of the human cooperative," the chancellor announced, trying to sound confident. Ryan stepped to the center of the chamber. In the past, humans had been given seats in the far back. Now he stood directly before the council leadership. "The cooperative thanks you for this opportunity," he said. "We come with terms for peaceful coexistence between our organizations." For the next hour, Ryan outlined the proposal the cooperative had prepared. It included fair trade agreements, non-aggression pacts, and limited technology sharing, all with unprecedented oversight requirements. "We understand that trust must be rebuilt," Ryan explained. "On both sides." Some council members looked offended by the suggestion that humans couldn't trust them. Others seemed relieved that any relationship was being offered at all. The Eldorian representative, one of the few who had stayed with the council, raised an appendage in objection. "This is outrageous. You speak as if we are equals when this council has existed for thousands of years before humans even left their planet." Ryan remained calm. "Times change. The galaxy changes. Those who cannot adapt are left behind." The words hung in the air. Everyone present knew it was true. The human cooperative now included 51 species and controlled nearly 40% of known space. The council's influence shrank daily. "To demonstrate our good faith," Ryan continued, "Earth is offering immediate medical aid to worlds suffering from the economic collapse. We have ships ready to depart with supplies and doctors." The offer was met with murmurs of surprise. Many council worlds were indeed struggling with medical shortages after human pharmaceutical knowledge was withdrawn. "Why would you help those who treated you poorly?" asked the new chancellor. "Because that's who we are," Ryan replied simply. "We walked away because we deserved respect, but we never wished suffering on anyone." By the day's end, the framework for a new relationship had been established. Not the old council hierarchy, but a balanced arrangement between power centers. The galaxy would never return to its former structure. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Ryan received an urgent message from Earth. He smiled as he read. "It good news?" asked his assistant. "The best," Ryan replied. "The first public wormhole junction has been activated. Travel time between Earth and Proxima has been reduced to 8 minutes. The news would send shockwaves through the council. The wormhole technology would cement the cooperative's advantage for generations to come." That evening, as the human ships departed, Susan Miller stood on an observation deck of the massive new diplomatic station orbiting Earth. Through the viewport, she could see vessels from 100 worlds docking at the sprawling complex. In just 18 months, humans had gone from dismissed council members to leaders of the largest new alliance in galactic history. Ships that once rarely visited Earth now arrived daily, bringing representatives eager to join the growing cooperative. Susan thought back to that day in the council chamber when she had made the decision to leave. How frightened she had been, how uncertain of the future. Now that moment seemed like the most obvious choice in the world. A small smile crossed her face as she watched a ship from a newly admitted species dock at the station. The captain had sent a message asking for Earth's help in developing their world's resources. Resources the council had always claimed were worthless. "Sometimes you have to leave to be seen clearly," Susan whispered to herself. In the end, that's all humans had really wanted. Not power or control, but simply to be seen for what they truly were, a species worth respecting. Now the galaxy couldn't look away.